Hi there, good afternoon. This is the Mutual Fund Corner. I'm Mangla Malu. With me is Sumaira Abdi. Remember, as every Tuesday and Thursday, we answer all your mutual fund related queries, equip you to create wealth by benefiting from the magic of compounding. For the markets, though, it is looking good. We're holding on to the 10,400 mark. Remember, just a few days ago, the Nifty was struggling to hold closer to that 10,000 mark, and from there we have a 400-point rally. Some more details coming in from M&M. Domestic auto sales up 13%, 55,350 units versus 48,860 units. The stock, remember, had moved higher on the back of the numbers that came in a little before that. But Sumaira, good afternoon.
Hi Mangalam, good afternoon to you, and we're waiting for HDFC to announce its numbers as well. So as we do that, let's take you through our top stories. Flat trade today. Key indices of the day is low. Weakness in heavyweights like Infosys and ITC drags the index. L&T fights for the bulls. Mid-cap index sees a big outperformance.
The L&T stock tops the leaderboard following an all-round beat in the second quarter. The management maintains FY19 revenue guidance at 12 to 15%, and L&T's strong earnings take the entire capital goods sector higher.
Auto sales remain muted. Maruti sees a slowdown. Ashok Leyland posts lowest sales since May. The lone bright spark remains tractor sales as Escorts registers a 24% growth from last month.
Market veteran Ramdev Agarwal says beaten down sectors like capital goods and steel could well be on the cusp of a mega rally. Adds that the earnings growth remain challenging.
And the RBI governor must stand his ground and not resign. That's the word coming in from Arun Shourie just a day after the government sought to de-escalate the tension with the Reserve Bank. Shourie says the crisis is far from over, adds that corporate interests are involved in the present crisis and the exit of Raghuram Raj. All right, Berger Paints also announcing numbers. Mangalam, looking decent actually. Our poll on the profit number had the number at about 121 odd crores, but 170 not looking too bad. We'll have to see what the segmental breakup is as well. 1490 on the top line again looks like a good number. Looks like
a good number, in fact, and the stock not moving too much. However, the EBITDA is pretty much in line with expectations. You can give or take a few crores here and there, especially given the sort of numbers that we've seen from the paint industry. Before that, we had Kansai Nerolac number one, sharp miss on the margins. The next day, we had Asian Paints missing on the margins. Then we had the management of Berger Paints coming and saying that, you know, these numbers haven't affected, or this quarter, our numbers haven't been affected as much as the industry, and which is why we're seeing a good growth coming in. 1490 crores on the top line indicates that the volume growth could be upwards of 11-12%. So let's see how that goes.
I think they have also seen a margin miss. I saw that number just flash by. We were expecting 14.8 odd crores, yeah, so at under 14%. Berger Paints to falling to this margin pressure. But we'll wait for more details in a bit. For now, let's invite Kaustubh Belapurkar of Morningstar, who joins in to answer all the mutual fund queries that are coming in. Hi, Kaustubh. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Good to see you. Our first caller is through to us. We have Mr. Ashwini Mohanty, who's on the line with us from Odisha. Hi, Mr. Mohanty. Good afternoon. How can we help you? Mr. Mohanty, can you hear me? Okay, I'm just going to read out the query then. Mr. Mohanty is 50 years old. He has an SIP in the DSP BlackRock Small Cap Fund. For the last 3 years, he's been putting in about 6,000 rupees a month. He's now lately grown skeptical and he's looking to switch, but not necessarily to a mid or a small cap fund. So he wants recommendations. You know, Kaustubh, this is also my reservation, because for somebody, and I'm assuming that this is the only investment, right? Because that's all the information we have. My reservation would be that if this is the only exposure to mutual funds and you've chosen to go the small cap route, what should you do now? Move to an index fund, move to a large cap? What should be the strategy?
Sure. So I think you've raised a very pertinent point, Samara, that given the age of the gentleman and just given the context where we're coming from, a small cap fund can be volatile, and we've seen the way the markets have been on the small and mid cap side through 2018. So I would recommend that okay, whatever's already gone through, he can continue to stay invested, but anything beyond that, he can actually start a fresh SIP into a large cap or a multi-cap fund, which would ideally be more suited for a risk profile, you know, for his kind. But that said, about the fund specifically, right? I mean, you know, a comment about that the growth has slowed down. So a couple of things there. Managers do go through cycles, you know, their style. So this fund has lagged behind its peers over the last year or two, but nothing's fundamentally changed with the way it's being managed. So Vineet now, who's the CIO equities at DSP, after Anup Maheshwari's exit, he's been managing this fund for quite some time, and you know the styles remain consistent. So I would say that it's still a good strategy, but you know, for this gentleman, perhaps given that you know, he may not have the wherewithal to hold it for a longer time horizon, you know, he can stay put in whatever he's already invested, but the rest he can, you know, from now onwards look at something like a large cap or a multi cap fund, and you know, we have some excellent strategies on that side that he can look at.
All right, just keep an eye out on Berger Paints. That stock's surging now at the high point of the day with a gain of about 3%. So we're getting some more details coming in. 16.3% revenue growth with a 2 to 3% price hike would imply that the volume growth has come in at 13 to 14%, and that would be much higher than the street expectations of about 10 to 11%, and the highest in the industry for this quarter. We saw a decline of about 420 basis points on the company's gross margins. However, that has been that hasn't percolated down to the company's EBITDA margins because of lower other expenses as well as some curtailment on costs, and that is why the net profit has been pretty much in line with what the street was expecting. The stock is surging because post the results that came in from Kansai as well as Asian Paints, Berger Paints did see a bit of a knock. So if a longer term horizon comes in for you, the stock from upwards of around 320, 325 saw a bit of a decline and then recovered. Add to that the fact that crude is also lower now than it was back then in the second quarter is aiding sentiment out there. 3% on Berger Paints. But we move on to the next query. Naresh Dama calls us from Bengaluru. He's planning to invest in IDFC Sterling Value Mutual Fund. Wants advice on the same, Naresh?
Yes.
How much money do you want to invest in this fund?
Yeah, I'm investing 9,200 rupees per month as an SIP, and I would like to know whether I'm on right track for long-term gains. And I would like to start invest 10,000 rupees in SIP in mid and large cap also. Could you please suggest me 2 mutual funds?
All right, Kaustubh, you have his details and he's made his query as well. What would you suggest he do?
Okay, so, you know, this strategy, you know, the IDFC Sterling strategy, if I look at the way it's being managed, right? So it's largely and predominantly invested into mid-cap sort of stocks, and it has a value bent. So, you know, there is clearly a value bent in the way Anup manages strategy, and that's the way it's going to be going forward. A good strategy, extremely well-run strategy, but I don't want this to be a very large proportion of you know, his portfolio. I mean, you would want to add on, you know, multi-cap, large-cap growth, you know, sort of funds in his portfolio. So in fact, I think his next question was, you know, he wants to invest another 10,000 rupees into a couple of, you know, mid and large cap funds. So I would definitely urge him to do that, maybe even take that up more to a higher level. And there's some great names. So for instance, you know, there's the HDFC equity on the multi-cap side. There's the Mira Asset India equity, which is again a multi-cap fund. These are some of the really well-managed strategies. There's a Franklin India equity, which is another great strategy that he can look at. So I think he's kind of on the right track with where he's thinking of diversifying his risk, and he should definitely look at amping up his allocation more to the large and you know, sort of side of funds.
Okay, up next, Mr. K.S. Jayadevan has written to us from Kerala. He has investments in the ICICI Balanced Advantage Fund. So he wants to know what he should do with it. I think he's been investing about 1,000 rupees a month in this since 2015. So, you know, this Balanced Advantage is a category that has really been peddled a lot now. Does it still retain value, especially for a person who's, I'm assuming, in the low risk profile?
Right. So, in fact, when I look at Mr. Jayadevan's profile, it's interesting. I mean, he's retired. He's 58 years old. So, I would, you know, automatically assume that he does have a more conservative sort of risk appetite here. And this fund then in that sense is actually picks up pretty well because here's a fund, I'm just talking about the mandate of the fund where they will dynamically manage the equity exposure depending on the market valuations. And they've been doing that. So if you currently look at the net equity exposure, it's about 40% to equities. So it's, as the market rises, the valuations go up, they keep cutting exposure. And as it gets to lower levels, they will increase exposure. So that helps investors like this who can, put it on auto mode and, enjoy lesser volatility as compared to an equity fund. But obviously, you should be cognizant that it will not mirror an equity fund return because there will be, a classic case right now where we're sitting only 40% in equity. So when the markets do move up, the move up in equity allocation would only be gradual in that sense. So that's something he needs to be keeping in mind. But given that they do have a conservative risk profile, I think this is not a bad option to stay invested in.
Okay, numbers also coming through from Welspun Corp. The stock has shot up and it looks like a decent set actually. So the profit growth has seen a growth of about 40% and the revenue at 2354 is about a 17-18% rise. The company has there is some provision that they have taken related to the IL&FS bonds as well. There is some MTM impact. There are also there's a forex loss as well, but I think accounting for all of it, it's looking quite decent. The order book, I don't have the number as yet, but the management has written that their order book is at an all-time high, and therefore they have visibility then of strong volumes, better margins in the coming quarters. So at least the outlook is quite positive. And they are looking at increasing localization across markets, etc. So all in all, it looks like a decent set. The stock is at the high point.
For the Nifty, we're back in the red. So a couple of these heavyweights weighing in on the Nifty. Infosys, which was already under pressure, is now at the low point of the day. Along with that, we have ICICI Bank too selling off from the top. And the big boy Reliance out there down about 0.5% in the last 15-20 odd minutes. So all these stocks should come up for you right now. In fact, M&M too, after the results, after the auto sales number as well as tractor sales numbers did come by, the stock did see a bit of a spike, and now that has been sold into, so back in the red by about 1.2% for M&M. But in the mid-cap end of things are looking fairly good, especially for the consumption space. United Spirits up about 10%. Remember, the results were pretty strong, 30% plus growth on the EBITDA. Management commentary in the earnings call strong too, and that stock is at the high point of the day. It's had a good week. In fact, it's up about 20% for this week itself. Financials are doing well, so all these financial stocks have done well this week. Ujjivan, Equitas, both of them up about 16 to 22% this week, and now gaining more ground, currently at the high point of the day, Sumera.
Yeah, and also news coming through. This is an exclusive. We understand from sources that the ordinance to bring amendments to the Companies Act has been cleared by the cabinet. Remember, our correspondent Tim Z had also alerted us yesterday that this could be taken up, and she's now sending in details that this has been cleared. We'll wait, of course, for the official news to come through as well. But amongst what was on the agenda was the capping of remuneration of independent directors, the idea of decriminalizing 83 offences, as well as examining the role of directors themselves. I think off late there has been quite a few issues that have come through regarding the role of independent directors on boards. So we'll get more details of that in a bit as well. And also for the market, though, we once again slipped back into the red. So we're back below that 10,400 mark. It's about 60 points gone now on the Sensex. The mid-cap index, though, it's shaved off some of its gains, but it's still holding up with nearly 150 odd points in the green. Some more numbers coming through. GIPCL reporting a one-time loss. Okay, let's get back to that story on the Companies Act. Tim C at Jaipur, our correspondent, now joins in. Hi, Tim C. What more have you picked up?
Well, the cabinet today has cleared the proposal mooted by Ministry of Corporate Affairs to bring in amendments in the Companies Act 2013. And what they have through this amendment proposed is how to decriminalize almost 83 offences. There was an entire report submitted by Corporate Affairs Secretary Injati Srinivas, and almost the entire report as is has been cleared by the cabinet. But all these amendments will be brought in through an ordinance, they are now waiting for a presidential nod, which is likely any moment. And through these, some of the major aspects of these amendments, let me now put across those, is how to curb remuneration of directors, how to bring in more accountability for directors, independent directors, and how to bring in more corporate governance within the boards to avoid any crisis-like situation. So all these are relevant with the current situation where we are seeing the entire IL&FS crisis, where we are seeing a lot of frauds coming up. So government is trying to strengthen the Companies Act so that all these cases can be avoided in the future. But let's see how soon President Assent comes in so that the ordinance can be promulgated.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for that, Tim C. So the President's assent is most important for this. So with that, we shift our focus back to the markets. In fact, the mid-cap index is now up around 150 points, still outperforming the frontline index. However, it has shaved off some from the top. A couple of stocks which are doing well in an otherwise, in an any case strong market, the one which is just sold off a little bit, NMDC is sitting at the high point of the day. Along with that, we have Torrent Pharma too, which is sitting at the high point of the day. But the stock on our radar right now is Bajaj Electricals. Posted a good set of second quarter numbers. Their revenue grew by about 71%. Margins were a slight miss. We have the CMD of the company, Mr. Shekhar Bajaj, joining us now. Thanks a lot, Mr. Bajaj, for joining in. So the 71% revenue growth that came in, if you could break that up for us in terms of how did your durables business do? And secondly, how much of this was on account of the acquisition of Nirlep that you made?
Okay. Our total growth, 25% is come in our consumer segment. Even first quarter, it was the same, around 25%. So that 25% level, 20 to 25% growth in the consumer segment should continue in future also, is our expectation. Coming to EPC, first quarter, there was no growth. So a lot of investors felt that what has happened, why, in spite of such good order book, why? So we said, it is not month to month, unlike in a consumer product, it's month to month. Here it is got to do with order execution, and therefore there's a growth of 126% in this quarter, resulting in a 52% growth for the first half. So whatever was the backlog we have cleared, plus we have gone ahead. So we were looking at a 30% growth. We are at the 50% growth in the first 6 months. Okay. And we think that this 50% growth level will continue in the coming next 6 months also, because our order book is very strong. Our UP project is now picking up speed, and therefore we need to grow by that type of percentage. And therefore our new objective is that against last year's 4,600 crore, we are looking at possibly trying to reach a level of 7,000 crore. 3,000 crore coming out of B2C, which is consumer product, and another 4,000 crore will come out of EPC business, including luminaires.
Mr. Bajaj, good afternoon, sir. So far, how have the festive sales been? And because of the channel inventory, do you expect higher discounts and therefore margin pressure in Q3?
See, our October sale has also been very strong. The demand is very consistent, basically because of our very strong and distribution and very consistent price policy. We do not give any extra discount, which you were asking, that Diwali is coming, are you going to give any extra discount? The answer is we give no discounts, we don't give any special pricing, and therefore retailers are much more comfortable because they know that the neighbor will get the same price. The problem of competition is not Bajaj versus Havells or Bajaj versus Philips, it is Bajaj versus Bajaj. If a neighboring shop is selling at 95, I find it difficult to sell at 100, and therefore I have to give a reduction. When both my neighbors are all going to have the same price formula, I can work at my margin, not worrying that my neighbor may be selling it cheaper because his cost is same as mine. This is what is the thing. So therefore I don't think that by somebody giving a price incentive, by giving a 5 or 10% reduction in price, is going to majorly change the benefit, because the dealer will pass it on to the consumer. So we must give good price for the consumer so that he continues to get at a good price. So there is no problem of him comparing with others who give a 5 or 10% reduction today, then the neighbor gives another 2-3%. So that is where our problem. We don't have that problem.
Right, Mr. Bajaj, moving away from the quarterly performance, from something to do with the long-term strategy of the company, if you could, apprise us of the developments, the leadership, what is the plan with regards to top management of the company? You guys were looking at a professional CEO. Any update there?
Absolutely. It has already been circulated about an hour back. His name is Anuj Poddar. He will be the chief executive. He's been he was on our board for the last 2 years as a non-executive chairman, director, non-executive director, and chairman of the audit committee. He's a chartered accountant. He worked 13 years in Viacom. Before that, he was in Arthur Andersen and PwC for 10 years. So he's got a very good experience, and therefore, because of that and his 2 years experience with Bajaj Electricals as a director, he will be able, and he's 46 years old, so to that, 44 years old, so to that extent, he'll be able to add a lot of value, and so that there's no gap in continuity. What Anant was doing, my son was doing as a MD, he was also young, he wanted to do, luckily because he's been on the board, so he knows Anant where he was going and those changes, so I think he'll be able to put the company ahead.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Bajaj, for joining in and apprising us of that important detail. So Mr. Anuj Poddar, who was the independent director, has now been elevated as the CEO of Bajaj Corp. With that, we wish you as well as the company good luck, and also end the show on that note. But do remember to email us all your queries. We will address them with our experts. Stay tuned. Closing bell will take you through the last hour of trade.